At number 10, we have Cellular Jail, also known as Kalapani. This prison is notorious for terrible conditions for the inmates. Reportedly, prisoners could face torture, medical tests, forced labor, and, for many, execution. The inmates have tried to go on hunger strikes to protest the terrible conditions. However, the guards began force-feeding them anyways. The prison is located in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and being sent here is the equivalent of a living execution. If a prisoner were to complain, they'd be subject to extreme torture methods. One of them being that they would be forced to wear coarse clothing that was rough on their skin and scratch their skin for 3 months. Many escapes were attempted, but prisoner 12819, Mehtab, and prisoner 10817, Choi Toon, came the closest to succeeding. According to The Guardian, they stole away from the islands on March 26, 1872, rowing out into the Bay of Bengal on homemade rafts across a 750-mile stretch of turbulent water, dodging schools of bounty hunters who fought over 250 rupee rewards, which was then 25 pounds. Picked up by a British vessel, they persuaded the crew that they were shipwrecked fishermen and eventually pitched up, free, at the stranger's home for Asiatics in London. The two were fed, clothed, and given a bed, but while they slept, Colonel Hughes, the home's proprietor, took photographs that were circulated around the empire. One morning, Mehtab and Choi Toon awoke to find themselves shackled and frog-marched aboard a ship bound for India. At number 9, Chennai's Pushkar Prison. Back in the days of it being commissioned, this prison was brutal. Prisoners had no access to water and cleaned their toilets with mud. Even when they had access to water, they had to choose whether to wash themselves or their clothes. Nowadays, it seems the prison has changed its ways completely. Additional Director General of Police and Inspector General of Prisons, Ashutosh Shukla, told The Hindu, the facilities provided to A-class prisoners are portrayed as a luxury. Mattresses, clothes, cots, tables, private cooking, and eating vessels are permitted to the prisoners of A-class as per Tamil Nadu Prison Rules 1983. There is nothing unusual. If a prison can afford to wear a suit inside the prison, we can't prevent that. Wearing shorts and shoes are also permissible. The prison does have one very big problem that seems to keep rearing its head. Prisoners keep getting cell phones somehow and taking hilarious selfies in their cell. The prison authorities removed 18 television sets after they found that inmates were using the USB ports in them to charge mobile phones brought in illegally, sources said. At number 8, Moradabad Central Jail, Uttar Pradesh. This prison has a maximum capacity of 650 inmates, but actually houses 2,200 prisoners. As they all share cells, they sleep in shifts. The lucky ones get their own cell, which is only 6 feet by 2 feet. For comparison, the average American cell size is 50 to 70 square feet. What's worse? 70% of the total 300,000 inmates in India's 1,356 prisons have not been convicted of any offense. They are under trials, most of them victims of police high-handedness and a grindingly slow judicial system. Of them, nearly 2,000 have spent more than 5 years behind bars without being convicted of any crime. At number 7, Bagusarai Jail in Bihar. Bagusarai Jail in Bihar was such a terrifying experience for an 18-year-old Amit Kumar that he still wakes up screaming from nightmares of police boots crashing into his body and faces of hardened criminals staring at him. Kumar was released on June 13th after spending 72 days there. He was arrested on charges of facilitating a neighbor's abduction. Tortured to make him confess to the crime, he was released only after the abducted boy's body was found and another neighbor confessed to the crime. India Today conducted a massive investigation into the jails in India and discovered a huge crime ring within the biggest prisons. At number 6, Bur Jail. In Patna, almost every major crime is linked to the gang lords lodged in Bur Jail. In February 2011, under trial Bablu Mishra, accused of selling spurious liquor, was beaten to passing in Bihar's Nawada Jail at the behest of the powerful liquor mafia, which feared that Mishra would spill the beans. Bur Jail in Patna is one of the largest prisons in India, headed by Sri Jitendra Kumar. He is also known to control the illegal activities inside the prison. Kumar is a 1995 batch officer and has experience of working as the central jail superintendent for more than 10 years. He is considered a no-nonsense cop. Corruption is a large problem in India as well. Often cops accept bribes from inmates to turn a blind eye to them smuggling things behind bars. At number 5, Delhi's Tihar Jail. Tihar Jail is one of the most corrupt jails in India. Rajiv Agarwal managed to smuggle in a BlackBerry phone. It is not known how long he had the phone before it was recovered from his cell during a surprise check. A page 3 prisoner accused of a white-collar crime disclosed how he managed to use his satellite phone undetected in the prison for 2 years. According to him, life in prison can be comfortable if one has money and is not in the media glare. From pizzas to chicken from Mario's Bukhara to the best quality booze, everything can be arranged for the right price. It's just that the chicken has to be boneless and the liquor clear like gin, vodka, or white rum. I calculated that one needs about 20 million rupees a year to live comfortably in jail, the former Tihar inmate said. At number 4, Yerwada Jail, Pune. This is the famous jail that Mahatma Gandhi spent several years in during his Quit India movement. It is one of the biggest prisons in South Asia and the biggest one in the state of Maharashtra. It can house up to 5,000 prisoners at once. During his 1932 imprisonment, which started after his arrest in January 1932, Gandhi went on an indefinite fast to protest against the communal award for depressed classes on the 20th of September 1932. He discontinued his fast after signing an agreement called the Pune Pact with the leader of depressed classes, Dr. Ambedkar, in jail on the 24th of September 1932. Gandhi was released from the jail in May 1933. At number 3, Parapana Agrawal. So apparently India holds a yearly competition during a hygiene meeting to determine which prison has the most amazing hygiene out of them all. Parapana Agrawal has taken the prize. Yes, they have prizes for first place. Around 1,319 prisons from across all states and union territories had participated in the contest, which was held in Ahmedabad recently. Quality of the food, livelihood, and health of the prisoners, cleanliness inside the prison compound, maintenance of toilets and bathrooms, safety, security, and duty deployment were some of the parameters which were surveyed as part of the competition. A competition on how clean a prison is seems a bit oblivious to the reasons a prison exists for. At number 2, Madras Central Prison. Madras Central Prison used to be one of the largest prisons in India, but had all of the inmates transferred to a different prison. It was originally built to house transit convicts who were to face the Sazai Kalapani in Cellular Jail. In 1999, some of the inmates rioted following the passing of an inmate named Boxer Vadavelu. They set fire to a room where the assistant warden had taken refuge. Riot police were called in to contain the riots. The police initially used tear gas to quell the rioters before resorting to live ammunition. In the battle which ensued between the inmates and the riot police, 10 people, including a prison official, were executed, while more than 100 people were injured. At number 1, Sanganer Open Prison. Open prisons aren't a known concept in the West, but let me break it down. Open prisons have minimal security. Sanganer Open Prison gives prisoners 12 hours to roam every day. At the end of the day, the inmates must return for a head count. The system is completely trust-based with the prisoners. Admittance to India's open prisons is similar to how parole works in many countries. Prisoners are transferred from conventional prisons into open ones based on a range of criteria such as behavior, motivation to reform, and physical and mental fitness. Number 10, Abashiri Prison. This penal institution is located in Abashiri, Hokkaido Prefecture. Constructed in 1890, this prison was a staple in the culture back in 1965 for a film that came out that year titled Abashiri Prison, which detailed fictional stories from the very real prison. In April 1890, the Meiji government sent over 1,000 political prisoners to the isolated Abashiri village and forced them to build roads linking it to the more populous south. Initial conditions were extremely harsh, with insufficient food and rest, and over 200 prisoners passed away from malnutrition, accidents, and as punishment for attempting to escape. Abashiri Prison later became known for being a self-sufficient farming prison and was cited as a model for others throughout Japan. The prisoners who were held there included politicians, activists, spies for the Soviet army, and former Yakuza. The prison now has a museum dedicated to the legacy of the prison and its notable prisoners, and is the only prison museum in Japan. Number 9, the Tokyo Detention House. The Tokyo Detention House is located in the Katsushika Prefecture in Tokyo and is operated by the Ministry of Justice. This prison contains one of only 7 execution chambers in Japan. All executions in Japan are carried out by hanging. The execution chamber in Tokyo has a trap door which is operated by one of the 3 buttons in the next door room, which are simultaneously pressed by 3 prison staff members so that none of them will know who activated the drop. Before entering the execution chamber, the condemned person passes a Buddhist statue of Kannon, a bodhisattva associated with compassion. The execution chamber has 2 sections, with both of them together no larger than a 15 tatami mat room. When the execution happens, the body drops into a room below the execution chamber. It is in this room where execution is confirmed. The prison's main purpose is to detain people awaiting for trial, convicted felons, and those sentenced to execution. Number 8, Osaka Detention Center. Osaka Detention Center is a correctional facility in Miyakajimaku, Osaka. This prison is another with an execution room, used to hang notable executioners. Osaka Detention Center was in the Japan Times for a controversy in 2019, where it was reported that some essential things for prisoners were much too expensive than normal. This is what they said in the article. Tissue paper and other daily products sold at Osaka Prison are so expensive that inmates mostly cannot purchase them, a situation amounting to a human rights violation. According to local lawyers, the Osaka Bar Association advised the prison to make improvements in a statement dated March 29th, after finding that 800 pieces of tissue were being sold inside the prison for 594 yen, some 4.5 times higher than the market price. Number 7. Nagoya Detention House. This correctional facility is located in Higashiku, Nagoya, housing one very notable inmate, Tsukasa Kanda. Tsukasa was one of 3 people who executed a woman after parking a van on a road waiting for someone to ambush. The other 2 people involved were Kawagishi and Hori. They found their victim and robbed her of her ATM cards before hitting her in the head with a hammer approximately 30 times, while simultaneously choking her with a rope. Capital punishment is a legal penalty for executioners in Japan, but the general sentencing guideline means that execution sentences are not usually passed for a single execution committed. Fumiko Isogai, whose only child was executed in this crime, launched a campaign to call for the execution penalty for the 3 executioners in September 2007. Within 10 days, her petition was signed by 100,000 citizens. She presented her petition for the execution penalty with some 150,000 signatures to the District Public Prosecutor's Office of Nagoya on the 23rd of October 2007. About 318,000 citizens had signed her petition by December 2008. Although single executioners rarely face an execution sentence in Japan, it was expected that the recent trend towards stricter punishments, backed by the growing public support for capital punishment, would encourage the court to sentence Kanda and Hori to execution. Kawagishi's and Kanda's fathers also asked the court to sentence their sons to execution. Kanda was then sent to Nagoya Detention House and hung for his crime. Number 6. Kusatsu Special Prison. Kusatsu Special Prison was a prison that operated between 1938 and 1947 in Kuryu Rakusen-en Sanatorium in Kusatsu Onsen, Kusatsu Town, Gunma Prefecture, Japan, where criminals in public leprosariums throughout Japan were imprisoned. Prisons for conventional crimes had been built earlier in all public leprosariums. 22 out of 93 prisoners passed away of cold or maltreatment in the cells or after confinement. In Japanese, it was called Tokubetsu Byoshutsu, which translates to special ward, or Ju Kanbo, which translates to prison for severe crimes. There were 8 independent cells. Each cell was less than 4.5 meters in size, with wooden floors with a hole in it as a latrine. There was a small hole for the distribution of meals. There was no heating system. The cells had tall walls and were physically separate from each other, each cell being a separate building entity. The temperature would often reach -20 degrees Celsius. Administration, maintenance, and repression were roles partaken by male nurses. Number 5. Kikuchi Medical Prison. In 1909, the first public leprosariums, or sanatoriums, started in Japan, with wandering leprosy patients which included criminals. In 1915, the treatment of criminals was discussed by directors of leprosariums. In 1916, the decisions of confinement and custody could be made by the directors of leprosariums, such as imprisonment of less than 30 days within leprosariums and reduction of meals. Between 1912 and 1951, there were various riots within the leprosariums. In 1939, a special prison was started within the Kusatsu leprosarium, which led to the Kusatsu Special Prison incident. In August 1947, members of the Japan Communist Party visited the special ward and found that 22 criminals passed away in the special ward or after imprisonment. However, responsible persons could not be punished. Discussions by diet men, officials of the Ministry of Welfare, and directors of leprosariums and representatives of leprosy patients agreed on the necessity of a prison. Number 4. Fuchu Prison. It is located in the city of Fuchu, Tokyo, to the west of the center of Tokyo metropolis. Before the end of WW2, Fuchu Prison held communist leaders, members of banned religious sects, and leaders of the Korean independence movement. Fuchu Prison was opened in June 1935, after the need for a new and larger prison was determined by the Home Ministry, in a review following the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake. during which Tokyo's main prison, Sugamo Prison, was destroyed. During the pre-conflict period, the prison also housed many political prisoners as well as common criminals. After the conflict, the prison was visited by Harold Isaacs of Newsweek, French correspondent Robert Ghislaine, John K. Emerson, E. Herbert Norman, and Dome reporter Tei Tataishi. The 1968 300 million yen robbery took place outside of the walls of the prison. The prison was home to former Yakuza, foreign inmates, and executioners. Number 3. Tokushima Prison. Tokushima, 520 kilometers west of Tokyo, converted a building to house elderly inmates, putting itself at the forefront of an effort to cope with Japan's graying prisoner population. The prison holds prisoners all the way into their old age, not even letting them leave then. "I have a heart condition and used to collapse often at the prison factory," said an 81-year-old inmate at Tokushima, imprisoned for life for ending a taxi driver's life and injuring another person 6 decades ago. Prison rules forbid publishing his name. Number 2. Sugamo Prison. The rules at Sugamo Prison are strict. The jailers were inside the prison cell block with the prisoners, and the guards were stationed outside anywhere from towers to hallways to entrances. No hands were to be laid on the prisoners unless there was a dire emergency. There were no problems. Each prisoner had a single cell to himself. A jailer watched them 24 hours, unless they had been removed for court. The prisoners were required to sleep with a dim light on, and their hands had to be outside of the covers. They were allowed 1 hour of exercise a day and could communicate with each other for brief amounts of time. One of the major concerns was prisoner self-harm, yet in the cell block with the older men, there had been no attempts for anyone to take their own life. Number 1. Yamaguchi Jail. The nation's first prison operated by the private sector opened in Mine, Yamaguchi Prefecture. The Mine Social Return Promotion Center, built on 28 hectares, does not have any inmates yet. It will soon begin accepting prisoners serving time for their first criminal offense. The prison has the capacity to hold 500 men and 500 women. I hope you will live up to expectations and trust toward realizing safe communities by offering high-quality correctional education, making use of private sector creativity. Justice Minister Jinen Nagase said in an inauguration speech. The government has consigned most of the prison's operation, including security, job training, and cleaning, to an operating company set up by concerns including a major security firm. The 51.7 billion yen contract runs for 20 years. At number 10, Chelyabinsk Prison. This prison is considered to be the oldest prison in Russia. The infamous ruler of Russia, Ivan the Terrible, ordered the original construction of this prison out of wood in 1555. In the year 1646, the prison was rebuilt in stone. There's a legend that Stepan Razin, leader of the 1670 to 1671 peasant riot, was held briefly in the Chelyabinsk Prison while en route to his execution in Moscow. The fortress was built there to facilitate Moscow's Tsardom's presence in these lands, subdue the local Tatar tribes, and make them pay tributes. At number 9, Butyrka Prison Castle. Varlam Shalamov notes in one of his tales that the Butyrka is extremely hot in summer. Edward Limonov in his drama Passing in the Police Van emphatically agrees. He says that with the collapse of the Soviet regime, overcrowding has become a real issue. There are more than 100 inmates in cells meant to contain 10 people. Most of these people are politically unreliable subjects from the Caucasus. Since epidemics are a problem, the wardens try to fill cells entirely with people with AIDS or with tuberculosis. However, this does little to curb the problem, since many inmates are substance users, and there's at most 1 needle per cell. Moreover, inmates are brought to the tribunal in overcrowded police vans, so that healthy inmates are exposed to tuberculosis. At number 8, Matrosskaya Tashina Prison. The name of this Moscow prison has an interesting history. The street where it is located also bears the name Matrosskaya Tashina, which means the sailor's silence. Since Peter and the Great's time, sailors were settled on the banks of Yauza River there, and in 1771, a hospice for veterans of the Russian fleet was organized. The prison, founded in 1775, was initially also a house of restraint, a special institution where people who committed crimes because of mental diseases were kept, along with debauchers, drunkards, etc. In 1870, the house of restraint was transformed into a regular prison. At number 7, Krusty Prison. Although it is permanently closed now, built in 1893, this vast red brick complex was originally Europe's largest solitary confinement facility and used to hold political prisoners, including Trotsky in 1905, and in October 1917, the entire provisional government. Later in the Soviet period, it was the site of the incarceration of Joseph Brodsky on charges of parasitism. Krusty has been infamous in recent years for chronic overcrowding, TB infection, and corruption. At number 6, Vladimir Central Prison. This prison was founded in Vladimir in 1783 during Catherine the Great's reign. It was initially built as a labor house for petty criminals, but in 1906 it became a central prison, a specially guarded and fortified detention facility. Here, the most dangerous and important convicts were held, and during the prison's history, no jailbreaks out of here were registered. Currently, the Vladimir Central Prison is a special security prison. It is also famous in criminal folklore because of the eponymous song by Russian urban criminal, chant and singer Mikhail Krug. At number 5, Volata, Russia's Pyatak Prison. Inside the prison walls of Russia's Alcatraz, you can find the country's most dangerous criminals. With the state of the prison facility in Pyatak, they'd come out even worse how they came in. That's if they even came out. A prison psychologist said that the place destroys a person's hope and the person itself. During the first 9 months of staying there, the inmates begin to adapt to the solitary and psychological torture. After 4 to 5 years, an inmate's personality would begin to deteriorate. According to the psychologist, no one can survive being stuck there for 25 years. You would not come out without being psychologically destroyed. At number 4, Black Eagle. In the USSR, Black Eagle was the only colony for prisoners on deceased row. But since 1997, the deceased penalty has been suspended. Today, Black Eagle prisoners are divided into 2 groups. Those whose punishment was mitigated to 25 years imprisonment, and those serving a life sentence. Prisoners serving a life sentence live in separate buildings, usually in cells for 1 or 2. They're kept inside for 23 hours a day with an hour to walk in a special room without a roof. Prisoners sleep with the lights on, and during the day, lying in bed is prohibited. At number 3, White Swan. White Swan was founded in 1938 as a penal colony for the Soviet Union to hold political prisoners, particularly priests, but was eventually used for common criminals as well. In 1955, a special decree of the CPSU Central Committee changed the colony to correct the so-called thieves in law, and the main task of the prison was the total isolation and closure of all methods of communication between prisoners and the outside world. The Soviet authorities began to staff White Swan with some of the highest quality correctional officers in the country to control the thieves in law. In order to be able to withstand the bribes and intimidation. In 1999, White Swan was repurposed to house serious criminals serving life sentences and, unlike previous detainees, were not expected to ever leave the facility. The prison has roughly 300 inmates, 1/3 of its maximum capacity, held in cells of 1, 2, and 3 people. All cells have a dossier containing photos, articles, and brief biography of the detainees. White Swan was the first prison in Russia to feature an on-site professional psychologist, and the administration, after studying the prisoners, settles them based on psychological compatibility in order to avoid conflicts. The conditions of the prison supposedly correspond to the requirements of international standards, with a library, correspondence materials, a commissary, a weekly shower, and an hour-long walk per day. During White Swan's entire existence, there have been no confirmed escapes. At number 2, Polar Owl Prison. Also known as Yamalo Nanet's Autonomous Okrug, this prison is one of 7 supermax labor colonies operated by the federal government. There were reports in the media that some employees of the colony were involved in a scandal with the falsification of a confession. Some unscrupulous guards were suspected of beating testimonies from prisoners with the use of physical and psychological violence. Novaya Gazeta reported 190 fake turnouts, while Izvestia reported 32 fake turnouts. According to Novaya Gazeta, the Federal Penitentiary Services for the Yamalo Nanet's Autonomous Okrug tried to hush up the case, since high-ranking officials could be involved in it. At number 1, Black Dolphin Prison. Black Dolphin Prison is a correctional facility in Sol-Iletsk, Orenburg Oblast, Russia, near its border with Kazakhstan. The prison houses approximately 700 of Russia's worst criminals. Prisoners at Black Dolphin are all serving sentences of life imprisonment. The prison began accepting these inmates on the 1st of November 2000. Inmates are kept isolated and housed in cells that have a set of 3 steel doors. For 90 minutes a day, they exercise in a large cage. During this time, cells are searched for contraband or illegal items. Inmates are also under 24-hour surveillance and supervision. They are not permitted to rest or sit on their bunks from the time they awake until bedtime. That's pretty harsh. Number 10, El Borsha Police Detention Center. It's been bad in El Borsha. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, said Alfie, a former non-league footballer from London, on a UK inmate's experience. When they took him to the CID substance unit, they beat him for an entire 5 days. He told me police officers tasered him, slapped him in the face, and all they fed him was bread and a little bit of water. He was basically tortured and put in a cell with 30 other people for 5 days.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm surviving.
The UAE Public Prosecutor's Office said Mr. Hood was convicted based on evidence including the items found in his possession, information on his phone, third-party statement, and his own confession. Mr. Hood had access to an English interpreter at all relevant stages, including his questioning, confession, and trial. He was represented in his trial by a defense lawyer whom he selected. Mr. Hood has since appealed the initial ruling in accordance with UAE law and will receive a hearing at Abu Dhabi court. At all times, Mr. Hood has been treated in accordance with the UAE law and applicable international standards. Number 9. Dubai Central Jail. In a 2013 study by Reprieve, a company who tries to serve justice for the wrongfully convicted, data they've collected from 124 prisoners at Dubai Central Jail shows that the inmates are being treated terribly. Over 75% said they had been physically abused at some time after their arrest. All but 5, 96%, were subjected to questioning by police without ever having seen a lawyer, and 95% were interviewed by prosecutors without a lawyer present. 85% of prisoners said they were forced to sign documents in a language they didn't understand. Of the 78 prisoners who were later able to have these documents translated, 91% said that the documents did not accurately represent what they had said. Number 8. Dubai Women's Central Jail. The women in this prison are identified mostly by the color of their clothes, either pink or red. Those in pink clothes are serving shorter sentences, and those in red are serving time for more serious reasons. A unique facet of this jail also is the fact that there are kids in it. That's right, there are kids in this jail. They stay with their mothers in prison if no one can take care of them. Because they have to facilitate the children, the prison has a kid-friendly design, with a school and a kindergarten along with some toys for the kids to play with. Number 7. Sharjah Reformatory and Punitive Establishment. Brigadier General Ahmed Abdul Aziz Shuhail, director of Sharjah's Punitive and Correctional Institution, affirms that the UAE's punitive and correctional institutions respect human rights pertaining to freedom of belief and opinion, healthcare services, and equality. He added that the institution's headquarters comprises a human rights office affiliated to the Office of the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of Sharjah Police, who is mandated with ensuring prisoners' human rights are protected. In an exclusive interview with the Emirates news agency, WAM, Brigadier General Shuhail said, as part of the Directorate General of Punitive and Correctional Establishments at the Ministry of Interior, we seek to achieve several goals, starting with implementing the penalties set forth by legislators and the reform process, and ending with the prisoner's return to his normal life as productive member of society. Number 6. Al-Watba. Overcrowded cells, cruel guards, indiscriminate violence. We have all seen and heard the cliches used to describe prisons in the Middle East, and Al-Watba defies every one of them. It is closer to a residential detention center, with living quarters, a clean and well-kept kitchen, a library, a theater, and a workshop. Built 35 years ago, Al-Watba, about 40 minutes outside of Abu Dhabi City, is the largest and oldest of the Emirates' 5 prisons. Men's and women's quarters are separated by large metal gates and tight security, but beyond the gates, the women's quarters are decorated with murals of pelicans, falcons, and forts. Number 5. Fujairah Jail Facilities. This one is weird. It's a jail facility offering services to anyone willing to pay for them. Fujairah Jail Facilities offers its products and services to customers both local and other parts of Fujairah. This is growing day by day. Fujairah Jail Facilities goes the extra mile to offer its products and services online to increase customer reach. People working here in Fujairah Jail Facility are well trained in problem solving and good market knowledge, with experience in Fujairah and business, treating customers with kindness and good manners. Although they sell services and various products, it doesn't say anywhere on their website what exactly they're selling. Number 4. Al Razin. In the middle of the desert, about 110 kilometers from UAE capital Abu Dhabi, behind the glittering towers is Al Razin Prison. Considered the most notorious prison in the Arab world, according to World Prison Brief's classification, Al Razin, nicknamed the Guantanamo of the UAE, was built in the era of Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan as an addiction treatment center. However, since 2011, it has turned into a prison for revenge acts against political opponents and human rights defenders, and is one of the symbols of human rights violations in the Arab world. The DGPCE monitors Al Razin in a formal way by having a person visit the prison monthly to check the number of detainees. And when they complain to him about violations, he replies, "You deserve what happens to you. It's a natural consequence of your betrayal." Number 3. Ajman Central Prison. In this prison in the UAE, some few prisoners are now being a part of a trial service. The trial service includes testing a new way to have money be effective in the prison, even adding a smart supermarket to jail grounds. Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Mubarak Al-Ghafli, director of APRE, said that the management is making efforts to achieve the Ministry of Interior's strategic goal of ensuring the provision of administrative services in accordance with standards of quality, efficiency, and transparency, and to enhance the process of resource management and support. Families of inmates can go to any branch of Ajman Bank in the country and deposit the amount of money they wish to send by providing the name and number of an inmate. Number 2. Punitive and correctional institution. Most prisons just say they're rehabilitating inmates and preparing them for release if they behave properly, but this prison actually is rehabilitating inmates with programs to help them. A program consisting of a number of workshops and other therapeutic rehabilitative activities comprising the skills necessary for the individual to handle themselves and others, with these skills broken down as follows: communication and interpersonal skills, decision-making and critical thinking skills, adaptation and self-management skills, other awareness raising and training lectures as required by the participant group sessions, and even yoga. At number 1, Al-Awir Deportation Jail. This jail is where inmates are held when they are deported from the UAE but cannot afford a plane ticket out. Popular individual Bobby Wine has a charity fund for getting plane tickets to the deportees held in the jail. They said this on Twitter: "After our cancelled charity concert, we visited sisters being held at Al-Awir Deportation Jail, Dubai. All they need is a flight home for approximately $200 US. Here alone are 600 African girls, 200 Ugandans, and 400 other nationalities, away from the other 20 detention centers. The former MP at the Parliament of Uganda really cares about his people." Number 10. Alcatraz. There have never been any successful escapes from Alcatraz. 36 inmates put the inescapable title given to Alcatraz to the test, 23 of whom were recaptured, 6 of them were shot, and 5 went missing and were presumed drowned. The US Army began incarcerating military prisoners inside the new fortress in the late 1850s. During the Civil War, prisoners included Union deserters and Confederate sympathizers. The cells were also used to imprison Native Americans who had land disagreements with the federal government, American soldiers who deserted to the Filipino cause during the Spanish-American War, and Chinese civilians who resisted the army during the Boxer Rebellion. Number 9. Black Dolphin. Black Dolphin Prison is a correctional facility in Sol-Ilitsk, Orenburg Oblast, Russia, near its border with Kazakhstan. The prison houses approximately 700 of Russia's worst criminals. Prisoners at Black Dolphin are all serving sentences of life imprisonment. The prison began accepting these inmates on the 1st of November 2000. Inmates are kept isolated and housed in cells that have a set of 3 steel doors. For 90 minutes a day, they exercise in a large cage. During this time, cells are searched for contraband and illegal items. Inmates are also under 24-hour surveillance and supervision. They are not permitted to rest or sit on their bunks from the time they awake until bedtime. Number 8. Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay, or Gitmo, became the focus of worldwide controversy over alleged violations of the legal rights of detainees under the Geneva Conventions and accusations of torture or abusive treatment of detainees by US authorities. Most detainees were captured in Afghanistan or along the border with Pakistan in the early days of the US invasion. Many were reportedly caught by US allies and handed over in exchange for bounties that ran into the thousands of dollars. Some were held and interrogated by the CIA for months or years at undisclosed locations, commonly referred to as black sites, before their transfers to Guantanamo. Number 7. ADX Florence. ADX Florence is the most infamous supermax facility in the world. It holds the most notorious criminals in history, including El Chapo. El Chapo has escaped prison twice while being held by Mexican authorities in 2015 and 2001, but never while being held at ADX. Nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies, no one has escaped the facility located in the high desert about 2 hours south of Denver since it opened in 1994. Inmates are housed in soundproof 7 by 12 foot cells for 23 hours of the day on permanent lockdown, with no contact with other inmates. Staff members are carefully vetted and have little direct contact with the inmates. Number 6. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison. Kenya is known for its harsh prison conditions, but Kamiti is by far the worst. It is notoriously overcrowded and the conditions are unsanitary. The prison's official capacity is 1,200, though reports suggest there are between 1,800 and 2,500 inmates crammed inside. Though Kamiti was already well known for housing political prisoners, infamy grew in 2008 when a riot sparked by a contraband search was captured on cell phone and shown on television. It also made headlines again in 2021 when 3 convicted terror suspects escaped. 7 wardens were later arrested for helping aid their escape. Number 5. San Quentin. The oldest prison in California, San Quentin is notoriously known for its violence. It has been home to many infamous criminals, including Charles Manson, Scott Peterson, and Sirhan Sirhan, who assassinated Robert F. Kennedy. In early 2022, the state started the process of closing the deceased row and relocating the inmates, 3 years after the California governor ended executions in the state. Over the years, and particularly in the 1960s and 70s, San Quentin earned a reputation for corruption and interracial riots that were encouraged by the guards. Number 4, Mendoza Prison in Argentina. With a population roughly 3 times its capacity, Mendoza Prison in Argentina is severely overcrowded. As many as 5 inmates are crowded into cells that measure only 43 square feet, and many inmates are forced to sleep on the floor without mattresses. Amnesty International reported on the conditions back in 2005, alerting that people imprisoned in Mendoza are in such a desperate situation that they have gone as far as to sew their mouths up in demand of better living conditions. Prisoners had inadequate medical care, and the prison lacked a proper sewage system, forcing inmates no other choice but to use plastic bags and bottles as their washrooms. Number 3, Camp 14 Kacheon, North Korea. Near the middle of North Korea is a 60 square mile prison facility known both as Camp 14 and Kacheon. According to reports by the US Department of State, Camp 14 was built in 1959 near the center of the country, about 40 miles north of Pyongyang. Camp 14 is considered a political prisoner camp and can hold up to 15,000 prisoners. That means they are serving life sentences for being enemies of the state. Inmates here are routinely starved and forced into labor in mining, textiles, and farming. Number 2, Gitarama Prison in Rwanda. The most crowded prison in the world, Gitarama is home to more than 7,000 prisoners in a facility that was built to only house 400. Most of the inmates are suspects of the Rwandan mass execution that took place in 1994. Given the extreme overcrowding, the men and women housed here are forced to stand barefoot on the filthy ground for all hours of the day, causing their feet to rot. Many eventually require amputations, but with only one full-time doctor dedicated to the prison, most prisoners are unable to receive the treatment they need, resulting in half a dozen passings each day. Number 1, White Swan Prison in Russia. The Soviet authorities began to staff White Swan with some of the highest quality correctional officers in the country to control the thieves in law, in order to be able to withstand the bribes and intimidation. In 1999, White Swan was repurposed to house serious criminals serving life sentences, and unlike previous detainees, were not expected to ever leave the facility. The prison has roughly 300 inmates, 1/3 of its maximum capacity, held in cells of 1, 2, and 3 people. All cells have a dossier containing photos, articles, and a brief biography of the detainees. At number 10, overcrowding. Thousands of inmates are housed in supermax facilities. Most of these facilities are, however, overcrowded. Often multiple dangerous inmates are held in the same cell, one that is tiny compared to normal cells. The issues associated with prison overcrowding are not new, and have been brewing for many years. In many prison systems, detainees do not have the minimum space requirements recommended by international standards, and in some cases spending up to 23 hours of the day, if not all day, in overcrowded cells. Overcrowding can be so severe that prisoners sleep in shifts, on top of each other, share beds, or tie themselves to window bars so that they can sleep while standing. At number 9, how many guards there really are. This one is more scary for the guards than the inmates. Most prisons, like I said, are very, very overcrowded. This means that there is a huge disparity in the number of guards and inmates. Sometimes the ratio of guards to inmates is as crazy as only 1 guard to 100 inmates. This means that if things got out of hand, perhaps during a prison break, riot, or even just a fight, the guards could be overwhelmed. This has happened before and could happen in the future as well. Although the conditions in supermax facilities are hard for prisoners, that doesn't mean they can't find a way to cause chaos. If a fight or a riot were to ensue, the entire prison could be engulfed in it, and the guards would be beaten. At number 8, amnesties. In some countries, only periodic amnesties and pardons relieve overcrowding. While these provide short-term relief, they do not offer a sustainable solution and can erode public confidence in the criminal justice system. In others, costly prison building programs are undertaken to meet the growing demands for prison places. In 2020, many prison systems announced unprecedented mass releases of people in prison to reduce overcrowding and the risk of the transmission of a virus in places of detention. I'm not so sure how effective an amnesty is for overcrowding, but letting the most violent criminals closer to society is probably not a good idea. At number 7, what you do in them. Prisoners of maximum security prisons across the world almost all share one thing in common. They always have nothing to do. Most of the supermax prisons all have very strict rules against prisoners doing things. Inmates have 23 hours in their cells every day, with only 1 hour per day in a different cell designed for working out. Reports state that sometimes on the weekends they don't even get the 1 hour to work out, and instead just stay in their cells for the entire day. Another report says that some prisons around the world don't allow prisoners to even sit or lay in their beds after they wake up. They must stand in their cells doing almost nothing at all. At number 6, hygiene. One correctional officer has this to say about the smell inside of a maximum security prison. Having a bunch of adult individuals in such close quarters can breed some insane smells. I'm sure you can imagine, it's almost like living in a locker room. Ew. One report says that sometimes the inmates aren't even allowed to shower. If they are allowed to shower, it's only once a week. I personally couldn't handle that. I don't know anyone who could. At number 5, the most infamous Supermax prison, ADX Florence. El Chapo has escaped from prison twice while being held by Mexican authorities in 2015 and 2001. But ADX is different. Nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies, no one has escaped the facility located in the high desert about 2 hours south of Denver since it has opened in 1994. Inmates are housed in soundproof 7 by 12-foot cells for 23 hours of the day in permanent lockdown, with no contact with other inmates. Staff members are carefully vetted and have little direct contact with inmates. At number 4, how it feels to be in one. Current C1 columnist Robert Hood, who served as ADX warden from 2002 to 2005, described life in ADX in stark terms to CNN. As soon as they come through the door, you see it in their faces. That's when it really hits you. You're looking at the beauty of the Rocky Mountains in the backdrop. When you get inside, that is the last time you will ever see it. The Supermax is life after passing. It's long term. In my opinion, it's far much worse than passing away. And that's the opinion of a warden there. Imagine what the prisoners think. At number 3, how many Supermax prisons there are. In the United States, there is only one Supermax facility left standing today. That prison is ADX Florence, the same prison where El Chapo, as mentioned before, will spend the rest of his life. In Florence, Colorado, the prison houses up to only 400 inmates, all with an extremely good reason to be there. Prisoners there include Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and Zacharias Moussaoui. I can't say who they are, but if you know, you know. At number 2, what they do to the prisoners. Supermax prisons around the world have always been known for their poor treatment of inmates. Usually that would include torture, either physical or mental. The fact that they would never see the outside world again alone would completely break the prisoners almost to a point of no return. This mental torture would spiral them into being completely emotionless and hollow, or turn them extremely violent. At number 1, the security. All cells are soundproofed to try and prevent prisoners from communicating with one another. The windows are 4x4 and are designed to prevent inmates from knowing their specific location within the complex. They can see only the sky and the roof through them, so it is virtually impossible to plan an escape. Those who are in a Supermax prison are placed not as a punishment of their crimes, but by their previous history when incarcerated, or based on reliable evidence of an impending disruption, such as a gang leader or the leader of a radical movement. These decisions are made as administrative protection measures, and the prisoners in a Supermax are deemed by correctional workers as a threat to the safety and security of the institution itself.